All right. I think we got it. I just realized the description's wrong. Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 7th live stream from the Misfit Gamers Studios. I am your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. Today, we are going to talk about a little bit, kind of more of a ramble session like we did last time. As you can see it back on the couch, kind of liked this from last time. And I think when I don't have such a structured topic, or just when I kind of want to ramble, and when I really don't need to have the computer out or me up there, I felt this was actually not too bad of an opportunity. So, yeah, basically what I want to do today is... Uh-oh, hang on. YouTube's saying we got an error. That's a first. It's not it's receiving enough. Okay. That's fine. So we got a little bit of buffering. I apologize for everybody. Okay, so I will get that description fixed because I still think it says the 6th, and we are on the 7th live stream. So today I didn't really have a topic. I've been just really busy this week. Life, work, all that other stuff. And I really just haven't been able to keep my thoughts straight on a topic that I really felt I had a lot to say about. Ironically, as much as I always think about D&D and as much as I always want to talk, yeah, it's just been a struggle this week. So trying to figure out what I wanted to sit down and do, I figured I just have a couple, kind of like, man, wow, my brain is not working. So basically my wife suggested that I should just talk about a couple different topics and just see how long I can talk about each one. And with that, it kind of just sparked an idea of, wow, I am not doing good today. Anyway, it sparked an idea of being able to talk about essentially that, multiple items, and essentially that spurred the idea of miniatures and other game and play enhancements that a lot of DMs use, that I like to use, and I just kind of wanted to sit down and just give my thoughts on those. I figure it's not going to be that long of a stream. I'm going to try to push it to an hour. This microphone, I'm trying my nicer, fancy microphone. It's a lot heavier, so that's going to cut it down a little bit too. But I really like this microphone. I'm just trying a few things out, trying to see what we get in terms of quality, and see if we get any comments from you guys about which one you like better. You know, do you like me on the couch? Is it preferable if I have the microphone stable when it's on the table? Do you guys notice a difference between this microphone and the other one? Let me know in the comments. So let's get down to it. Let's get down to today's topic. So miniatures and more. So let's start out with miniatures and game boards, because obviously that's the main topic. Now, I personally don't use these. I personally do not use miniatures or game boards in terms of like game mats when I game. Now, what I mean by that is I don't use pre-generated, like, image-based ones. So I don't have, like forests or towns or things like that you would be able to move through. And the reason I prefer not to use that is, one, it's just a lot of stuff that you have to keep manage, and a lot of stuff you have to carry around, and it's investment, it's money. And I have a hard time investing money, or at least getting into things that don't have multiple uses. It's probably one of the reasons why I don't have just dozens and dozens and dozens of dice sets. It's just because I know that if I started buying a bunch, they would all be for a specific NPC or a specific character of mine, or for specific reasons. And the problem is I just have a hard time putting money into something that I know will just sit there. So for me, miniatures are kind of the same thing, where I love them. I think they're fantastic. I love, what is that? Something Forge. Man, Curse Forge, I think it is. I don't know. There's something, the website where you can go on and custom build your own. I absolutely love when players do that. I love anything that gets players really into their character, into the game, into the storyline that they're playing through. anything like that is really something that I'm always encouraging of. And if you were a DM that uses this, I absolutely encourage it. This is not at all me wanting to say you shouldn't use it, and this is not at all talking about why it's bad. This is just the reasons why I personally don't use them, but I do love them. I love playing with miniatures. I much prefer custom miniatures, or at least player purchased miniatures. Player purchased miniatures in terms of gameplay. Now, obviously, DMs out there, get all of your stuff set up, your counters, your markers, your miniatures, get yours set up as you want them. But I one step further or one step away from not using them is I would prefer that the players be able to provide them, or at least choose them, because at least unless you're doing like a one shot where those particular miniatures are chosen for that particular setup, I'm like I've said before, I'm always about bringing the player closer to the character and getting them to be more invested. So when they get to choose it or when they get to provide it, I feel like that's going to bring a whole lot more to the table than them just saying, "Hey, here's yours." But of course, if the game requires using miniatures, then I mean, and they don't have them, absolutely provide them. It's just one of those things where, again, with preference, definitely, if you're going to be using miniatures, encourage your players to get their own, instead of having to provide them, or at least give them an option, because it'll give them an opportunity to get a little bit more closer with it. Now, in terms of why I don't use them, it's not just because it's a cost. It's not just because it's stuff to manage, and it's not just because part of it is also because it takes more pre-planning, in my opinion, because it's not just pre-planning the fights, but then it's pre-planning which miniatures, where they're going to be stored, when they're going to come out, how they're going to be used. And as much as I appreciate it being a good visual for both the players and the DM to just have a bird's eye view of what's going on, I think that can be accomplished in different ways and for different purposes. But I absolutely understand the benefits of having minis, of having a game board. So outside of the tangible stuff, outside of the money, outside of the organization, outside of all of that, the reason I prefer not to use minis in game is the way that I like to play, the way that I like to DM, the way even that I like to be a player. I personally find it slightly limiting when I have miniatures and a game board in front of me. Now, the reason I find this to be a problem... Okay, hang on a second. Jesus. The reason I find this to be a problem for me is because I become limited to what I can see. So if I have a game board that says that we're in a dungeon and I can see my my little character piece, it's harder for me to think from the perspective of that character piece than it is to think from the perspective of what's right in front of me, of what I can see from the bird's eye view. Now, granted, that does give me a little bit more meta information. It does give me a little bit more of a particular insight, but it doesn't necessarily give me a good indicator of what my character is going to be and should be doing. Plus, it's also just one of those things where I know for me, I'm not as creative because, again, I feel like just having those visual indicators just puts me at a disadvantage. I just don't think as freely because I'm focusing more on what I can use that's in front of me and what is there, because things have been put in front of me. So, of course, those things are important. And of course, those things are what I need to be using, instead of looking at it from the point of view of, this is the room, this is the scenery that I've built, or that I've created in my mind, and now I can pick and choose what to mess with. So that's one of the reasons why as a player I don't do well with it, and as a DM, kind of the same way. I do have maps. I do like doing maps. I like drawings. I do like using imagery. And I also will very often play with a whiteboard. My whiteboard is my favorite way to play. Now, I did specifically mention I don't have mats in terms of the pre-generated ones. I do like square and hex mats. I do have a couple of those that I like to play on. For the same reason I like to play on a whiteboard. Sometimes I'll use the hex mat. it really a lot of the time depends on the complexity of the gameplay of the usually the combat session or whatnot, or how many people. If I have a lot of people, it's usually easier. Or if I know I have players that are more visual, I will tend to use a mat because that's better for them. But of course, I always try to do what I can for my players without changing up how I game too much or how I DM too much. But the reason why I prefer like the whiteboard and everything else like that is it's a lot more dynamic for me, and I can make the notations I need and give the players the information they absolutely bare minimum need. Then beyond that, they can kind of fill in the gaps. And this is kind of important. And I haven't really gone over this much, even though I did a whole video a while back on me as a DM. One thing I didn't go over as much, and I really should, is how I usually like paint the scene and the indicators that I give people and how I give them all of the clues and the red herrings and just the general purpose knowledge that they need to explore and to move forward. And with that, I like to leave things like if I need them to, or if I have something really good, I will paint a very, very detailed picture, and I will give them just a verbal painting. But more times than not, what I'm looking for is getting them to be more imaginative and more creative. So I will give them the information they need. I will make the descriptor enough to where they can use it to create an image, but also enough to where the image they create that's personalized and custom to them still matches what it needs to in my reality and my gameplay. So obviously if I say that there's a door at the back, I'm going to be more specific about where it's located if it's something that they can interact with. Where if it's just going to be like a shopping stall like out on the street, I'm not going to describe every little like nook and cranny unless they start asking for it, because in that sense sometimes too much information can just overload players. Sometimes too much information just gets off topic and deters from what's actually happening. And not to say that that level of roleplay and that level of detail in gaming, either from a player perspective or from a DM perspective, is a bad thing. I just know for me, when it's too much information, it gets to a point to where I start to question what's the benefit to all of it, because as much as you can put into a description, or as much as you can put into lore and backstory and intrigue and all of this, at the end of the day, what of this information is really going to be useful in game? And this is another reason why I don't, kind of one of the like loftier reasons why I don't use modules and everything, is because all of those pre-gened worlds are so fantastic and so great, but it's a lot of information that you either have to digest all up front because you want to have all of that, like what does my character know and all that backstory. But it's also just because you don't live it, it's hard to digest all of that and then actually make that usable in a game where you're essentially from day one creating and learning what that character and who that character is along with them. I mean, you've created their backstory, you've created all of this, but you haven't really played with them yet. So trying to utilize all this information that they would have is also just, I don't know, I think it's more difficult on the players sometimes. I think people end up having the wrong idea of, they have to get the wrong expectations about like how they should be playing or how that they could use that information. And then I know I will say this too, a lot of DMs out there, as good as it is to have all of that, a lot of the times it ends up feeling like fluff because there is absolutely no connection to it. It's not just that we're not there yet to be able to have this information be beneficial, but it's almost as if I saw this on another channel, but it's almost as if you should have written like a novel, or written you should have written a short story versus written a campaign, because as beautiful and as amazing as everything sounds, it's not directly correlated to what the characters are doing. I mean, you can give them the entire backstory about why the king is the current king and what happened to the old king and, what the rumors are and all of this. But if they're going to start out in a tavern, going to go kill rats, and the entire campaign has nothing to do with like the diplomatic system and the political system, and it has nothing to do with any of that, and they're going to go on a whole path, for the church in town. All of that information about the royal family and all of their intrigue, it's nice, it's good world building, but if it's not going to come up in the game, and if it's going to come up in the game way, way, way later, but there's ways for them to have like naturally got this information through gaming, I feel like that's almost a disadvantage to offload so much up front. But anyway, I'm getting off topic because we're supposed to be talking about miniatures. So the reason, again, I said all of that because as a DM, I want to pull the inspiration. I want to pull the imagination out of my players. So I give them enough to build a picture, but I also make sure that that picture has enough details that whatever they're trying to interact with will match with what I know exists. And then that way we don't have to worry too much about what everything is. And so far, that's only come up once or twice, where we've had to go back and alter things a little bit because an expectation or a perception was wrong based on the description. But for the most part, it doesn't really come up because, again, unless you're interacting with a very specific object, what's out there in the world is more or less up to you to decide, in my perspective. Like, as a DM, I explain the world, I explain the town you're in, but the minute details that you see, I want you to fill in those gaps because those are going to be things where if you fill in those gaps, they're going to inspire you to do things. And yes, I should be inspiring you to do things, which is why I give you, descriptors, which is why I put things out there. But I also want your imagination and your creativity to think of things. If I don't tell you about something, but the way I described it place says, hey, there should be a well here. You didn't describe a town well, but the way that you described how it's built, how small it is, I think there should be a well. So if you're going to ask me, hey, is there a well nearby for, the water around? You didn't mention plumbing, and it sounds like that would be something where I didn't think it pertinent, but now that you've caught on to an idea, I'm going to let that idea roll and say, well, absolutely. After a couple blocks, you're going to find a well, and, there it is. It seems that, it's strategically placed kind of more towards the residential area. And then boom, now I can now dig that idea out, because for me as a DM, the whole world building, that's again, I think I talked about this in my other game. I really like the idea of a living world, having my players dropped into a very real living place. And when they come up with those ideas, I don't look at it as derailing from whatever I had planned. For the most part, that's, again, it's easy when I don't have anything, to not have anything planned, when the world itself is just there living and the characters are interacting with it, or the players are interacting with it. But for me, again, going back to, another topic with player agency, letting them lead the dialogue, letting players really lead things is another big component in my game. Yes, I have I have story arcs and plots and plans and NPCs and villains and nemesis and all of these ripple effects that are always going on. But at the end of the day, if I have a player who has an idea, I'm going to let them flesh that out, whether I had it planned or not, whether it had anything to do with what I want to do. Again, I never mentioned a well, but if they want to go into that well because they want to figure out where that water's coming from, and that develops into them coming up with a new plan that completely just, sideswipes anything that I had planned, I'm going to let that roll, because if I didn't think of it and I can't come up with a legitimate reason why anybody in the town would have thought of that, I'm going to let them fully get away with that and foil all of the things that I had, decided. And to me, that's exciting. I know a lot of DMs, like, it's so funny to me when a lot of DMs, like, online will complain, the traditional complaint that players always foil things. And to me, I love it. I love when they press things, because I feel like I'm now the player in that situation in my own game, because I've had all of these, NPCs planning all of these things, and now this group comes in, sideswipes them, and now that's something that my entire universe, my realm has now learned that trick. And it's not like I'm just going to be like always preventing them from ever doing that again. Now, granted, I wouldn't just let it happen that easily every time, but of course it's one of those things where now that I know about that, I can justifiably have people in my game think of it without having to be it forced, because it'll now be something that I have in my repertoire, and that's for my players. And that's exactly what it should be. It's an exchange. Players should always get better from their DM based on the experiences and the challenges that they're presented with. And I think the same thing. I think players should be pushing their DMs to become better, because I mean, let's face it, a lot of us would say that the worst DMs are the ones that are like some of the most confident or some of the most egotistical. And that's just because it's kind of a my way or else mentality. But when DMs really kind of challenge their own boundaries and their own limits with their players, and let their players kind of guide things, I think a lot of good comes out of it. But of course, there's that fine line between like having, drastically different viewpoints on how a mechanic works or rules is written. So it's a fine line to walk, but I do say that players can teach DMs a lot, and those are the situations that I love the most, where I don't look at it as a loss, because my intent for the end of the day is not to set off the trap that I had planned or spring the ambush that I've been wanting to unfoil on my players. The whole point is, for me, all of those interests are in-game interests. They are things that in-game NPCs want. So yeah, as much as as it would be fun to have those things sprung and have those effects happen, I look at it from a point of view of, I'm more excited to see what the player's experience is versus what I expect it to be, if that makes sense. So if they find things that I have set up for them, great. If they don't, even better. But I'm always excited just to watch them, because my biggest thing is, like, let's say they find a trap that you had. Let's say you had this really elaborate thing and they're able to disarm it. Now, one thing I have a problem with is if the DMs out there say, I had built this elaborate trap and they came in, rolled detect traps and disarm traps, and boom, they got it, and that was it. I mean, why are you letting it be so easy? Like, if it is just a roll, and I'm not saying that you can't have that mechanic if you're playing by the book, or if you're playing by a specific rule set that says, yeah, they get that roll and that happens. But at the same time, that's where I would just say, like, if that's annoying to you, I challenge you as the DM, make the trap interactive. Make it not a roll. Make it multiple rolls. Make it intricate, or make them have multiple traps to where they're either going to get sick and tired of rolling, or they're going to fail eventually. But again, different types of DMing. But this is one of those reasons why, going back to the original topic, because I've gone off again, why I don't like using minis and prefab game boards, because again, it's limiting the imagination of the player. And again, there's a lot of good reasons why you should do that. There's a lot of situations where having a game board, having minis could absolutely benefit you. But overall, I think it just is something that subconsciously will end up focusing the players and the DM on what's in front of them, and not what could be in front of them. But when it comes to that, even if I am using them, I much prefer 2D over 3D models. And I mean, miniatures, I love 3D miniatures. What I mean by that is, in terms of like those game boards, I'm not a huge fan of the 3D game boards. Again, it's just that thing of, I feel like it's at a point to where once you get to a 3D game board and you're using it, they're almost just not enough at that point, because once you go 3D, it's almost like, well, now there's not enough detail. Now there's not enough rubble and rocks and walls, and you can't really like climb. You have to do weird things to like make it seem where you are. But I don't know. Again, these are all personal feelings. These are just hot takes. If I have to have a game board, I prefer it to be 2D, but I would prefer just flat hex or square pad game pads, or a whiteboard. I love using a whiteboard, because on a whiteboard I can keep track of everything. I can keep track of initiative, health, enemies. I mean, just with small little indications, a couple different colors, I can make so many notations and keep track of everything pretty quickly. And I can draw things out relatively easy. I mean, I don't need to draw out what the field next to this, creek that's, a jumpable distance, right? If I tell you that you're in a lush field, you're next to a creek, this creek, winds around you, and you're at a big bend in it, and it's about, it's small enough to jump across, and not very deep. You can very easily like pick up some rocks and probably not even put your, maybe wrist deep. I don't need to draw that, and I don't need to explain anything more unless you, the player, wanted more. But if that's all you got, that should be enough to have an encounter. And if I have a whiteboard where I can say, okay, here's the barrier where the water is, I mean, that's just a couple blue lines. And then and you already know you're in a lush field. I don't have to draw all the grass. So you know where the water line is, because that's an important feature in a combat situation, right? I would do different colors for enemies versus players. I would let everybody know general location where they are, and at that point, I would give, little hints on distances, because that's the other thing. The one thing I do love about the square and the hex boards is distances. When it comes to certain playing groups of mine, some of them are much more tactical in terms of how they run combat. So I do like the hex and square boards for them, because they're much more keen on distances, setups, positioning, and all of that. Whereas most of my players, it's a lot more freeform, and it's a lot more like in the moment, dynamic, kind of, again, we a little bit more naturalistic and not as tactical. But that's also not so much, it's not the players, it's the characters they're playing, because it's most of the same players, but these characters aren't as rigid or structured. And it's really nice because for the most part, a lot of them also aren't range characters. So once I have a general map of how far everybody is, and I just have a couple, like mental markers, at that point, asking how far they are isn't so much a need of specific distances as whether or not they're in range. For, most of my players don't ask like how far they are so they can count their steps. They say, are they close enough where I can close distance? I figure out what their, movement is. Like, we'll do that quickly, but they're not worried so much about it. They're more worried about, can I close the distance? Can I hit him? And that's what I'm okay with. I'm not as worried about them, doing the specific calculations, because for the most part, I don't worry about, little numbers here and there. Like, if you're out in a field, I'm going to just say, yeah, they're roughly 100 feet away. I personally don't need to have a very specific, accurate number, because again, if you're out in a field, you're not going to, like, I mean, I've been out, on a war field, in the SCA before. I've seen, a battlefield of, 200, 300 guys in knight armor, facing off against each other in two large groups. You don't know what 100 feet is versus 120 feet. I guarantee it. When you're looking at enemies across a battlefield, like, unless you're trained in it, and yes, there are characters who would know exactly or have markers, but even people who have good enough distance, it's more gut feeling. It's more of, how far you can shoot with that bow, and how far you can accurately hit something, and you don't know specific. Yes, I like, game mechanics kind of require you to have the specific numbers, but again, I like more of the experience based. So for me, when I start the encounter, I already know whether or not you're within range of certain things. Like, I know most of my players' weapons, so it's like, I'll know if they're within range of, closing distance or not. I don't keep traps specifically. For a lot of my gaming sessions, a lot of the times it's okay, it's going to take you 2 sessions or, 2 rounds of movement to get to them. That's basically all I need. The game board does the rest. Like, it's more of an estimation. And I know that probably pisses a lot of DMs off, because it's not accurate and it's not exact. Sometimes I'm more exact. And again, it depends on my gaming group that I'm gaming with that day. But I don't know. I feel like I get a lot better experience with my players when we break when we go beyond those rigid boundaries. And again, it's more of they're living it out and feeling the situation out versus structurally going through it strategically, piece by piece. And again, just I always have to preface this. This is all hot takes. This is all just, how I personally feel about the situation, how it affects my gaming. But But pretty much outside of that, that was the main thing I wanted to talk about, was just kind of my feelings on miniatures, game pieces. I like anything that really, again, gets players attached to their characters, but yeah, don't tend to use them really too much. I think they're distracting. I think they limit I think they limit creativity and the opportunity for the player's imagination to really come up with some fun stuff. So that's why I don't use them. Now, other stuff, other game enhancers, gameplay enhancers, let's call them. Now, when it comes to that, there's a couple of things that I don't know. I'm on the fence on, and there's a couple things that I'm just straight up like yes or no on. So let's first talk about like dice rollers. Okay, dice rollers, guys. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. So, dice rollers. I think they look amazing. I think they were a fantastic idea. I think they were they're a really cool novelty, and I think they're a really cool collectible. I think a lot of them look amazing. I think 3D printed ones are can be so dope. But I find them fucking annoying as hell. Like I I have never seen a dice roller that is, what's the word I'm looking for? Satisfying. They're usually, I mean, I had one, and my buddy had one, and we ended up having to modify it and put some felt in there to quiet it down. But no, I just, very few dice rollers, even the well-made ones, there's just something not satisfying about just dropping it and hearing it clunk around or hearing it thud around and then just be spat out. Like, it looks cool. It's a cool idea. I love the way that they can get customized, but at the end of the day, like, I mean, I'm not that worried about people trying to like do anything with their roll. I don't know. I don't even want to call it lazy. There's something about rolling that dice for me, and there's something tactile about it. And yeah, I don't know if I would ever give up the full experience. And I know that's not much different. I mean, I'm just doing that versus doing that. Um, but yeah, for the most part, I find them annoying. I find them loud, and I also just, I don't know. There's something detached from the roll for me, and it's something I can't explain. This is not something that I can even make comment on towards other people. I just, yeah, it just takes away from the experience, and at that point, I might as well just have a dice roller on my app or on my phone or something, because picking it up and just dropping it just doesn't feel the same as actually like feeling in control of the roll. And maybe that's it. Maybe there's a subconscious thing of I want to feel in control, and I want to feel responsible for my role, and I don't want to be able to blame the dice roller or anything. I don't know. Speaking about that, I've already kind of talked about dice before. I love dice. I am seriously just like one slip up away from owning like tens of thousands of dice. I I love all dice. I geek out over dice at every game shop. I scour them on the internet a lot, and I fantasize about all the dice combos I would have, but I never end up doing it because, again, I know that they would just sit there. I know that they'd make me feel good if I ever got to show them off, or the random times I'd get to pull them out and use them. But aside from that, no, I've tried really hard refraining from it, because I've looked at it and I know how much I would have spent by now. And I can't do it. But no, dice are one of those things. I don't disagree with how much people can own. I I own very few sets. I have my very first custom set that I ever built that is migrated into my DM set. And I would like at least a couple more, but it is one of those things where once it starts, it's so hard to stop, and I just really need to be careful when I do that, because that will be a slippery slope for me in terms of what from collectibles in terms of that. But I also just know that I need, it's one of those things where I don't need a bunch of dice, and as fun as it all is, it's just never been something that I could commit to buying. Um, but man, is it so much fun to put dice combos together. I love everything about custom dice and just different ones. The metal ones are just absolutely fantastic. I would love a custom metal dice set. The stone ones are also really fantastic. Yeah, I would have that actually, you know what? If this ever kicks off, maybe that's what I'll do is for like major things, I'll just get dice sets and that's what I can like decorate with, because that would be awesome to have like very custom, very specific dice sets. Not just, fancy different colored plastics, but actually like really nice hand carved ones, wood ones, stone ones, metal ones. That might be something I try out. Um, so battle kits. I don't know how widespread. I haven't heard this term in a while. It's a term that my gaming group way back in the day with my DM used a lot. Because all of us, we all had battle binders. I now have a battle bag, which is just basically one of my wife's work bags. It was a duffel bag that she got from work. It's like a small size duffel bag, but it holds pretty much a lot of my D&D stuff, just not all of it. But if I ever have to travel or go somewhere, I have my battle bag. I used to have a battle binder, which was one of those old school like high school binders that like expanded. Yeah, that had like the fabric in the it was like all fabric on the outside and had the fabric like web on the side in the middle where you zipped it. And that used to hold all of my like player stuff. I don't know if that's still as widely used, but any kind of basically your battle kit, anything from like a pencil holder, whatever holds all your stuff. I mean, I know a lot of people are going digital for the most part, and all you really have in your kits now are pretty much your dice, I guess. I know Kage, his kit's really nice. His bag, he has this really, really nice. I'll have to have him pull it out next time he's here. This really nice dice box that opens up, has a big giant dice roller in the middle, has a bunch of slots for all the dice. Looks really fantastic. Again, I know these things I would buy, and these are things I would just have, but I don't. I wouldn't be using them enough. But yeah, those kind of things I think are essential, because again, those whatever encourages you to game. If it whether it's dice, whether it's memorabilia, all of that stuff. If it gets you hyped for gaming, do it. I'm all for it. Even artwork, custom artwork. This is something that I have just always been fascinated with, and I wish I was more of an artist. In terms of like drawing and painting, because whenever people can draw their characters or draw like the weapons or just really illustrate literally what's going on in their minds, it's something that just is I mean, I love people's descriptions. I love when people get really good descriptions of their character when they're doing introductions, but when they can draw it out and just get custom with it. It's excuse me. It's one of those things where I absolutely just can't get enough of player art. Kage and his players, they have a ton. He has like 3 or 4, I think, that do drawings for his games, and I've gotten really close to wanting them to do drawings for mine, because man, it is just like there are some great artists out there who can just bring D&D to life in a way. And again, not just, I mean, there's a lot of good artists, in Wizards of the Coast and actual like in the books and everything, but there's a different touch when it's all of the features are custom and not something that was done by somebody else. And I say that when, these are people's creations and some other artists created them, but that that unique touch of this is someone that someone's it's a character that someone is close to, either by listening to it or by playing them. Being able to bring them to life is, I don't know, it's beautiful. It is something that any type of self-done artwork at any level is absolutely amazing, because again, it shows that connection and that dedication to the character and to the gameplay. And I think it just also shows how much fun players are having. So I always encourage that, because I think it encourages people to enjoy things more. I think it's just another outlet, you know. Let's see, DM screens. So that's another one of those things. I am torn. Okay, the way I game, I don't really have anything a lot in front of me that I need to hide. I don't really have, like, you know, if I have notes, they're always on the that with for I think that they're basically a good use for anyone. I don't think that there's any bad use for them, except again in my situation, I would just have to have it on the floor, closed in front of me, and then at that point, I might as well just pick up the book, because I know where most of the pages I need are anyway. So, that's my take on that. One thing I will say about this, though, or going far back to the miniature discussion. So I'm a huge fan of players having minis. I don't use minis. I don't use game boards. But along with my hex and square pads, like game pads, one thing I will say is, like, absolutely fantastic to have is some sort of counters or markers. Any, you know, minis are great. They're almost a little bit too much sometimes in this situation, when you're using just, like, you know, drawn, like, quick little drawn things on a whiteboard, or on like a you know, on these game pads. But markers are also a good alternative for being cheap, and these can be anything from marbles to just little pet, you know, like I don't even know what they're actually called. I have those little flat marbles. They're not marbles because they don't roll, but they're those, like, they look like marbles, like little glass beads that are flattened. Those, I will say, are extremely beneficial when you do have visual players and you don't want to spend a lot of money. Anything to just kind of give a representation for things, and for everybody, even yourself, to keep track, is always a good thing. I don't use those as much. Like I said, I do have some gaming groups where I do have markers, I do have counters, I do have those little things to indicate enemies and positions of players, but that's usually only, like, combat oriented, and only in certain situations, because for the most part it's all verbal. I don't need game boards for them to traverse a dungeon or anything else like that. I mean, if I really do, like for instance, I do have a gaming group that they did need some sort of visual for long-term gameplay because of the area that they were in, and I did draw them out a map. I do enjoy maps outside of the whiteboard, and outside of occasionally using the game pads. I do like drawing maps, either for my players or walking through details for them to draw their own maps. I think that giving them that kind of tangibility as well is also a good alternative than making the game boards, because at least the maps can be highlights of the most important things without, again, having to drown out with all of the limitations of, you know, the excess details that wouldn't necessarily come up, you know, if you were in the perspective of the character. I actually think that covers most of what I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, it's going to be a pretty short stream. We're probably not even going to make it to the full hour. I just kind of wanted to get some of these thoughts out. I also just want to make sure that I'm keeping up with my weekly content. I'm not even sure why. Like, I talked about this before. This really isn't meant to kick off in terms of, like, I don't really expect a lot of people to be watching this or join in. It would be fantastic. I'm mainly doing it live because it allows me to be candid, and I don't have to worry about being on script. And it just helps. If I know I'm doing a video of some sort, I'm going to be more worried about how I say things and what I say. With this, I can just kind of keep rolling off the top of my head, and I worry about the edits later. Because the idea is that get a bunch of content developed doing this live stream, and then eventually make a couple YouTube videos, or a couple YouTube channels where it's bits and pieces of all of these live streams just, you know, hobbled together in more specific content. Whether or not that's going to happen anytime soon, I don't know. I have no skill set in the editing department, so it depends on when I get an editor. Plus, I know that right now this is also a lot of practice. A lot of this stuff is just getting my information out for my players, and eventually the scenery is going to have to change, the camera angle, everything's going to have to change to make this a better situation for YouTube. I know that, but the whole point that I realized doing this, I'm kind of going off topic here, but a little bit of background for you guys. I started doing this because I'm pretty sure I have ADHD, and it makes it very difficult to sustain really good hobbies. It makes it very hard to, like, I have a good job. I have a good, it's whatever. It's a paycheck. It pays well, and I'd like more out of it, but I have no passion for it, and I've never really had a passion for like a career. And of course, I don't want to say that I feel left behind by the online YouTube craze and everything. I just, it was never really my gig. But over the years, I've tried a lot of different hobbies. I've tried a lot of different things to do, and in the end, they were great fascinations. They were great hyper focuses at the time, but sustainability was low. And I've thought about doing YouTube. I tried to stream. I tried to do Twitch. I tried to do that before. I can't pay attention to chat and to talking while I'm gaming. I either lose myself in gaming or I just have nothing interesting to say. I'm good at games because I'm good at the game. I'm not good at games because I know what I'm doing. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but it makes sense to me. Like, I'm pretty good at Call of Duty, but at the same time, I'm not good because I know what I'm doing. I'm good because I'm good. Like, I'm good because in the game, I know what to do when I'm doing it. But telling people what I'm doing, why I'm doing it in the moment, it's happening too fast in my head to try to keep up and narrate it. So I'm not good at that. I don't even feel like I'm good at this right now. But what I kind of came to realize was that with D&D, it's the one thing I just never stopped doing. It's always going on inside my head. It's always something that I'm doing. And if there's ever going to be something that I am going to be able to do as a passion, whether it's a hobby or whether it's, a side gig or even something that, takes off and allows me to, quit my job and become self-sufficient on it. It's going to have to be something that I don't get tired of. It's going to be something that I can do at all times, that I can reproduce. And it's going to be something that even if I'm not in the mood for, it's not a huge challenge. And most importantly, it has to be something that I don't have a ton of fear in terms of failing, because it's not so much that I fear failure or even success. A lot of it is I just fear like the wasted time. Like, I don't want to put 2 years into something if there's a high chance of failure, not because I'm worried about the failure, but it's because that's 2 years of my life that I could be going for something that has a higher chance. And the end goal to me, the end goal changes all the time. Like, there is no specific end goal. Life, like, surviving life is the end goal. But I figured that I have to find something that I can do, and D&D is something that I can do all the time. I can talk about D&D almost endlessly. It's better when I have questions. It's better when people have interest in my realm and want to talk about it, because then I can just ramble forever about things. I love coming up with ideas for D&D, coming up with scenarios, NPCs, weapons, situations. Like, I love creating all of it. And when I put it all together, I just figured out that, if I'm going to be able to do something, it's probably going to be D&D related. And, I figure at the end of all of this, if it doesn't do anything, I'm having fun. I mean, I don't, the reason I don't have a schedule yet, or a specific day I live stream just yet, not only because I don't have a fan base to really promote it to, but I kind of just like doing it when I'm in the mood to. I kind of just like being able to pick this up, which is kind of the point of the live stream. It was just to be able to be like, hey, I have an idea. I'm going to just pop the camera on real quick and start talking. It's also to not feel stressed. So if I just don't feel up for it that day, if I just don't feel on, or if work was just too difficult and I just can't talk, that's another reason for just kind of live streaming and then making videos on this content after. Which is kind of, hopefully the goal is to get someone who can go through this, edit it well enough to put together, 5-10 minute YouTube segments of content. and then people can come here for the live stream and see it either live and be part of it or whatnot. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where if I'm going to put effort into something, this is probably going to be my best bet. So I have to accept that, you know? I mean, I'm not going to be a Twitch streamer. That's never going to happen. I'm not good enough at any particular game, and I don't know how to do that kind of, I don't know how to be that active while I'm also that active in something. And I don't know where else I'm taking this. I do have a Fiverr gig to help people build characters and NPCs for their realms, like backstories and things like that. I want to start spreading into, like lore building and things like that. The problem with that kind of Fiverr for me is I'm always in a creative mood, but trying to type it all out and give someone like a full thought out idea versus brainstorming with someone and soundboarding ideas, that's the big difference with me. And so I don't know how well I'm going to do with that, but yeah, I'm kind of going all in on this D&D thing. I'm probably not going to do skits. I don't know. I'm not an actor. I don't write scripts. I don't know how to do skits. I love skits. I would love to be in skits. I just don't know how to make skits. But I think in terms of talking about D&D, being able to talk about my realm, I don't know if it's interesting to people. I don't know if people are going to like my ideas. And I really don't even know where to begin talking about High Point in terms of how do I make it interesting to people. But that's why I started, with just the intro. I started with talking about how it's like gaming with me. I probably just need to keep talking about that, of just what different gaming sessions are going to be like. And also just talking about the setting more. High Point is a very unique place. It's much bigger than most places in D&D, but that's mostly lore reasons and reasons to give me more opportunities and more options inside, and to not make it so linear. But outside of that, yeah, I'm just trying to get used to talking to a camera. I'm trying to get used to rambling about my D&D ideas, and I'm trying to find out that perfect spot where I can talk about a subject, hopefully be interesting about it, but also not just talk, I don't want to just say things about D&D. I want to be constructive. I want to be helpful. I want to give people ideas. And I want to bring ideas out of people. I want to bring challenges. I want to be challenged. I want people to tell me why they think I'm wrong. And I want to discuss on that. I mean, I don't want to argue with you. I don't want to try to prove that you're wrong or I'm right. That's not the whole point. The whole point of D&D is to have fun. What I want to do is I want to know what you do different. I want to know why you think it doesn't work. And I want to challenge it. I want to explain why it does work. Yeah, I don't know if that's interesting or not. I think I'm going to probably have to start maybe doing D&D live, like actually like doing my gaming sessions, because it seems like that's like, I mean, obviously without actually posting how I DM and actually like doing games, I'm not really sure how else I'm going to get that popular, because I don't know if people are going to want to do, to just listen to some guy talk about D&D and never actually listen or watch them play D&D. Though, speaking of that, announcement, before I go off this 7th live stream, I am going to pull out the few episodes of Old Gods that Kage and I spoke about, and I am going to pull the few episodes that I did complete, and I'm going to figure out how to post them on here on YouTube as a podcast, and we're going to see how people like that. So stay tuned. We will probably be doing the Old Gods podcast either on this channel. I'll probably just do it on this channel, and then probably do a custom channel later if it seems to be kicking off and it's a series that we pick up. I mean, we haven't recorded in like 2 years. We started in like 2019. I think we recorded for over a year. Gaming 2 or 3 times a month and recording every single session. I mean, I have probably 2 seasons worth of content, but I only have like 4 episodes complete, and yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, and I'm very specific, so rip. But yes, look forward to checking out the Old Gods campaign from Misfit Gamer Studios. I think I'm going to sign off with that one. Let me know what you think in the comments about the use of miniatures and other, gaming enhancements. What do you guys use? What are your favorites? Let me know if you have any questions on the gear that even more of the gear that I have. Yeah, just let me know. I don't always know what to talk about. I do this because I like talking about D&D. I'm just not always creative with the topics I want to talk about, but I am hoping that this kicks off eventually, and yeah, at some point we will be able to get some people in here, and yeah, things will get a lot more interesting. But until then, keep on gaming. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend coming up. It is Thursday for me, so I got one more day of work. I'm gonna go relax for the rest of the night. Y'all have a wonderful time.